Welcome to Biz Ops Exposed, the interview series that shatters myths in business operations and uncovers the truths that drive success. I'm Tonya Kubo, your host, and joining me today are my favorite two operations experts, Gwen Bortner and Sonia Narvaez. And Gwen, as the founder and operations strategist of Everyday Effectiveness, brings 35 years of biz ops experience across 40 industries. Actually, it's more than 40, but I lost count. So we'll just go with 40-ish industries to guide founders in stepping into their power as CEOs. Meanwhile, Sonia, who is the owner of Operation QOL, transforms businesses at the ground level by organizing and optimizing their operations. So together today, we are exploring the unseen gears of business efficiency and profitability. Now, depending on which myths you believe about business and business development, today's episode's either going to keep you on the edge of your seat or might bore you to tears. But I hope it's the former more than the latter, because what we are doing today is challenging this anyone can do it, anybody can do this myth that sadly dominates the business world. Now, before I say much more about that, Sonia, Gwen, I have a very quick question for the two of you, which, as I was compiling my notes, I had this nagging thing in the back of my mind. So you're going to answer it for me and for everybody else live and on camera. Aren't you excited? Which is this a myth that pervades across all industries, or is this something that's very specific or maybe more pronounced in online business? What would you say, Sonia?
Everywhere, anywhere, anything, anyone, any person, like every industry that you can think of, everywhere.
Okay, tell me what that looks like. Like when you say it's everywhere, give me a couple of industry examples of how that could look.
So the myth is that anybody can do anything, right? Like it's essentially the same thing, right? Anybody can do operations, anybody can do anything. Like it's, simple things like that. So what about, I don't know if you guys have ever known this about me, but I'm not a good cook. Everybody says everybody can cook. Have you ever had a bad cook and they just, world's best worst chefs, right? That's actually a show. You don't want me to cook. But also in operations, one thing that people think, oh my God, what do you mean you can't answer that email? They're just asking for a schedule, like an appointment. Like what? That's easy, right? No. There's so many little nuances that go with things like that. There's tones, there's appointment links, there's which one of this. I could get so nitty gritty, but I think also one place that this shows up a lot is I'm just gonna get an intern to do it. They can, this is easy. Like anybody can do this.
Well, so you're talking to my heart, because I used to be a social media manager for a large organization, and I was frequently asked, well, can't you just get a millennial to do this? And to this day, that still makes me see red, because it's offensive to the millennial, right? I mean, granted, it's a different time now than it was back then, but it's offensive to the millennial because it diminishes their skill level and their expertise. And it was offensive to me at the time. So I totally hear what you're saying. Now, Gwen, what do you say? Give us your experience, because obviously, you've been doing this across so many industries over the years.
It is the fundamental problem is most of operations, people think anyone can do until it gets big. So once you get into really large organizations, then you see the specialization, right? And when I'm talking large, I'm actually talking like large organization, hundreds of people. And it doesn't matter if it's service or product based. When you get into large organizations, then you see people that specialize in HR, that specialize in finance, that specialize in change management, that specialize in project management, that specialize in documentation, that specialize in all of these areas. But early on, there's some, I don't know, crazy thought that Well, I've been able to do it, so anyone should be able to do it. Now they never. It's kind of what so I love Sonia's thing about being a cook. You know, everyone can probably cook something. I'm betting Sonia can actually make cereal. Which probably technically isn't cooking, but yeah. But can she really? Maybe she can boil a hot dog. I'm guessing, probably, maybe. But can she really make something more and more complicated? And when we first start out, it's simple. And so it is simple. But as soon as we start adding any level of complexity, then it's no longer as simple as we think. And so to me, that's where the issue comes. There's this giant gap between it's just me and it's all in my head, and I've got this giant organization that has a bunch of specialists. That's where the problem is.
Okay, so that makes me wonder, do you think, so what I'm hearing is that when you have a smaller organization, whether it's you're a solopreneur or you have, say, up to 10 people, is it that because everybody wears so many hats, you actually don't know what is operations, what is marketing, what is this, what is that? Is that the issue? Is that there's no defining lines and you have to get larger and more distributed in order to have those emerge?
That's definitely part of it, because it's a lot about, Tonya cooks and Tonya cleans, but Tonya doesn't do laundry, at the house, right? Because you like to cook and clean, and you're good at cooking and cleaning, but you don't do laundry. So Brian does laundry, and Brian takes out the trash. You start defining things based on people skills as opposed to the roles that are actually needed. And that happens kind of organically at that early stage, but there is this big piece in between where you need to start defining roles and responsibilities, and actually bringing in people who can really help you think through those pieces in a more detailed kind of way. And it's long before you get to hundreds of employees.
Got it. Okay, well, that feeds really well into my next question, which is going to be for you specifically, Sonia. In the conversations that we've had, oftentimes we talk about operations like an iceberg, where you only see a fraction of what it really is above the surface, and then there's all this stuff that's deep, deep under the water. And if you're not careful, it will sink a cruise ship, right? Or an aircraft carrier, depending on what water we're in. So, what is the surface level interpretation that you see out in the marketplace?
Sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm just making you breathe very deeply.
Sorry. No. So everybody assumes and believes that operations is administrative assistant type work. Like my calendar, my email, my, anything and everything, right? That moves the business forward in a way. It's the tinier details, right? Oh, you call that person to make that appointment for me. You do these things. That's what people believe it is. Do you know how many clients I've had that are like, have called me their assistant? I am a fractional COO, sir. I am not your assistant. I am like, this is not what I do. But everybody does believe like, hey, you're organizing and taking care of all my emails. You're organizing and taking care of all my client requests. You're organizing and taking care of every little thing, that's maybe 1-step, 2-step, 3-step processes, or ongoing tasks like this. And that's it. That's what you do. You do everything I tell you to do. That's kind of the biggest difference, right? Everything I tell you that you need to do, you do. In operations, we have to think a little higher than that, right? We think higher and we think more connected into how things are functioning together as a whole organization.
Oh, I like that. Okay, so operations isn't TaskRabbit, right? It's not just checklists. It's actually anticipating needs of the business and even professionals within the business, and then fulfilling those needs before they start to hinder the business. Is that accurate? Okay. I
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
I mean, it gets
Anything
in
else
the
you wanna
realm
add?
of, oh, sorry, go ahead, Tanya.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I was going to say it gets in the realm, like, sometimes you hear, oh, they're proactive. Then you're like, oh, so my executive assistant, she makes sure that the work blocks together aren't working, together. They make my life easier, but that's still not it. That's still not operations. That is just on you. We're talking about the business. What is the health of the business? And then, we could go down a ton of other rabbit holes, but I'm going to leave it there.
Okay. Okay. So we'll leave it there for now, but we're going to pick it back up. So I wanted to have some common language so that anybody watching, regardless of what their experience is, could, feel that they are able to understand what we're talking about and also participate in the conversation. So at Everyday Effectiveness, we define operations as the engine that businesses run on. And like every engine, right? Some engines super simple, super easy. Well, like I'm thinking like little twin engine planes, not nearly as complex as, I don't know, the engine that runs a jet. I assume. I'm not a diesel mechanic. I don't know any of this stuff, but I assume that there's a level of complexity there. And for us, when we think of the engine of a business, we believe it includes every function that falls between the process of what Gwen says is the marketing and sales of the offer, whether that's a product or a service, and the fulfillment or delivery of that offer. So for convenience, what I wanted to do is just break it down into the 5 categories. Gwen, these will sound familiar to you because I know you and me, we talk about these all the time, but Sonia, you're going to recognize them as well. So we've got goals, which, we can loosely define as the focus and direction of your business. Okay. So we're not talking about SMART goals. We're not talking about the specifics of a goal, but really just goals are that direction that your business is headed. Effectiveness, which is your business's ability to do things efficiently and consistently. The consistent part is where I think most of us trip up more than the efficient part. The accounting, which is understanding the numbers and why they matter. Again, it's understanding the numbers and why they matter, not necessarily what your specific numbers are. I think that's another area where people get tripped up. Resources, which are those pieces of the business that are limited in some manner. Gwen, I'll let you speak more to this in a moment, but I think oftentimes you refer to it as, the number of people that you have is usually limited. The number of time that you can allocate is limited. And of course, the number of dollars is limited. Those are kind of the 3 main areas that fall under resources. And then systems, which is how things get done. Now, Gwen, I'm going to send this to you. So in my opinion, when I look at that list and I think through it, I feel like when we're trying to challenge this anyone can do it myth, which is, again, it's dismissive to the anyone who you assign to do the thing, as well as to the business that actually needs this to function. I feel like each function is really a spectrum. Would you agree to that, Gwen, or do you see it a different way?
Let me ask you to define how you're using the word spectrum.
Oh yeah, because I think I think I conflate.
Yes.
Right. And I think I conflate spectrum and continuum, and I'm not actually going to pull those up on a dictionary right now, although I typically would. So I'm thinking, when I think of a spectrum, so I'm thinking like within goals, right? The direction in which we're driving the business, there's probably a piece of that anybody could do. Like there's an aspect of it that anybody could do. And then as you go farther into the spectrum, it requires more specialized skill or knowledge or insight. So like there's some things as you move to the spectrum that you could outsource to a high level consultant, but then there's other things that actually it would have to be handled in-house, because only somebody who's there every single day immersed under the hood really has what they need in order to make the decisions. Go ahead, Gwen.
Perfect. So and first I will just say yes, all of these things have some level of a variant of who and when and how they can be done. And part of the extra problem is that changes over time without big giant like milestones or things that's like, and today now this goes into this category. That they just generally quietly shift.
Okay, I need you to unpack that like more. Like what do you mean by
Okay.
quietly shift and how?
Because as the business gets more complicated, often the thing that we thought, person X could do, they could do when it was simple, but as it moves, all of a sudden it needs more. Let me see if I can give you a kind of a tangible example from one of my clients, right? I said our clients because we work together, but one of our clients. She has a retail business, okay, and in her case, early on, she was the sole decision maker, and therefore driving the goals, driving that process, and as that would make kind of demands on high, right? Like, we're going to do this, and everyone would go, okay, we're going to do this, right? But as she grew the business and expanded it in both physical and figurative ways, in multiple ways, what she realized was that she was still being, I'm the only goal setter. I'm the only one evaluating goals. I'm the only one doing it. And this was when I came in and said, yeah, that's the problem, is you're not getting enough information from all of these other areas to give you really good data to be able to make good decisions and make good goals, right? And so then she started having different meetings, and part of it is, she doesn't ask everybody in the organization for all of their input all of the time, because that's also not helpful either. But she has a couple key people. One is her, finance person, and one is her person that's responsible for, being on the floor all the time. And they actually give her feedback. And so this is a place where it was one person's job to do all of the goal setting and all of the planning and making all of those decisions. But now she'll start it, and then they'll argue with her and back, and either agree with her or disagree with her, and so it's expanded over time. Ultimately, she's still the CEO. She still has the ultimate responsibility, right, for goals in this case. And that's one of those things that the CEO always has ultimate goals. But we've got other people now that are actually well involved in that process. Does that kind of address what you were talking about,
that's
Tonya?
helpful. Yeah, actually, that's great, because I think that what that made me realize, right, and I don't think we've talked about it in this series so much, but we hear it a lot in business, right? What got you here won't get you there. Like that, oh, we marketing people, we love to talk about that, especially when we're trying to convince you to spend $2,000 a week on social media ad spend versus $2,000 a month. Yeah, we're really good at that whole thing. But what I see some business owners doing, right, is, and I think this is just human nature in wanting consistency, is we're waiting for that time where we've built the perfect ship and we don't ever have to repair it, change it, remodel it, right? We're just going to keep writing it and it's going to work forever. And so what you are saying, so not only is there this spectrum within each function of operations, but your overall needs of operations are going to shift and evolve as your business grows. And growth may be more revenue, growth may be more people, but sometimes growth is simply we're innovating, right? We're offering the marketplace something a little different than we offered them 5 years ago, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a difference in the offer suite or the product mix. So thank you for going there, because honestly, I wouldn't have gone there on my own. So I appreciate the guidance on the journey. Now, what I wanted to do is I would like to break down each of those functions of operations a little bit deeper, because we're promising that we're going to go deeper than surface level on this iceberg, and talk about what that spectrum is. So what I'm thinking here is, as we go through, and I'll start with you, Sonia, is if we can talk about, like, let's start with goals, because Gwen, used that as an example, is what's the spectrum of, okay, anybody can do this in the goals piece, to nope, you need specialized skill. And goals may be bad, because goals may be one that actually anybody can't ever do. So I'm curious what you think about that.
You're asking, sorry, I just want to make sure I understood the question correctly. You are asking me when the difference is between a basic general task to specialization.
Correct, under the function of goals. So the direction of the business.
So, whenever I think about goals, I think about, all right, big, big-ish, so then we got to make it littler, but then it's also got to be littled some more to then make it literally little. So, it all depends on the level of detail of the task that you've created and the level of detail within the project, right? So for example, if under goals, you think, all right, cool, we're going to say that our goal is $90,000 this quarter in revenue. Some action or tactics to complete that might be having, 6 speaker panels every week for the next 7 weeks. Great. Now we're coming down. So there is a level of experience that needs to be had to kind of go from this top goal to this next level tactic, to then the next level of details, to then the next level of actually like the tinier details, right? So when we go so basically it's coming down kind of in that funnel, but I like to think of it more as in like food, because I'm hungry. So it's like, you've got the cake, right? You're then taking pieces of the cake and you're doling them out. But when you start eating the cake, you're not going to eat the whole thing. I mean, you could, and no shame, but like usually you're going to cut pieces into it and you're going to eat it bite by bite. So that's kind of how we have to, think about, right? Like to cut the cake, right? It's a big thing, right? To serve the cake. And I don't know if you guys have ever served cake. Like it can fall apart depending on how soft or moist or hard it is. And then, when you're eating it, like you've got to be able to use the fork, right? You've got to be able to hold the plate or put the plate on the ground. Like there's little steps that you don't even think about that go into having and enjoying your cake.
Okay, so I think what I heard there is, when it comes to goals, I mean, the spectrum is really, you need specialized skill and knowledge to do the visioning, to be the visionary, to say, hey, this is the strategy. Now, where you can actually start to have less level of expertise is in the implementation piece. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes and no, right? Like,
okay, great.
And the reason is, and I will say yes and no because, or wait, no, yes and, go on. Sorry, you're gonna learn to do that way. Yes and, even at the most, what we consider, my basic and your basic are 2 different things, and that's also kind of the problem, right? Like to me, you should know how to use Google email. And if you don't know how to make tags and filters and in Google email, like how are you managing it? But do you know how many people don't know how to make tags and emails in Google? Like to me, that's kind of where the issue also arises, unless it's a step like take one forward and it's something natural to them, right? That's why when we hire people, we hire them with specific levels of experience, because we believe that they'll be able to implement at this level. And, through training, they'll get better and better and become more proactive. So that's kind of why I say yes and, because I don't want to say that, at the most fundamental, tiny, tiny level that you break this task down, anybody could do it. Because to me, like, that's incredibly subjective. And, you'd have to consider their culture, where they're coming from, what they do in life. Like if they lived in a cave, I don't know if they'd know how to shower, right? Like, so like there's just like all of these different levels and things that we consider, that we consider like that's basic, but then that starts to get a little more crazy. Sorry, I went all over the place there. I hope that made sense.
I feel like I followed, and what really I see Gwen, and she's, I think, got a lot to say here. It's funny is I know Gwen well enough to know she's jumping out of her skin, even though she looks so calm, cool, and collected. Go for it, Gwen.
Well, and what I really wanted to point out is and this is really, I think, what Sonia was getting to is whatever we are doing instinctively, and almost every business starts as a solo business. I mean, sometimes there's a little bit of variant there, but most things actually start pretty solo-y. And whatever we do instinctively, we forget isn't necessarily natural to everybody else on the planet. And so we discount it. My husband is a CIO. He runs a an IT department for a larger organization. He still says, well, yeah, but anybody could do that, could do this, not necessarily the running of the organization, but so much of the computer things has been so natural to him. It's like, they don't need me. Anyone can do that. It's like, no, that's not there. You actually have some natural skills, but because they came so naturally to him, he doesn't think of them as skills, right? That they're learned, and that not everybody has them, right? And so that's really where the problem comes in all of these areas, not just the goals, but all of these areas, is if any element of that comes naturally, then often you discount the learning level or the skill level that it takes to do the thing, whatever it happens to be.
So I don't want to get us off track, but I'm going to get us off track a bit here. So do you think that's why so many business owners, as their business is growing or as they're scaling, struggle with delegation?
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
You just thought that was a rhetorical question.
Look at Sonia's face. I was like, oh God, yeah.
You didn't even know I actually wanted an answer, because again, like for the two of you, because you live this, breathe this, it's such a yeah, duh. But I know for a fact, because I work with a lot of CEOs who truly believe that they are hiring bad people or that they are bad leaders because of the breakdown in delegation. But what you're pointing out, Gwen, is an entire different reframe of that. Because what you're saying is, it's not that they're bad leaders. It's not that they're hiring bad people. It's just they take for granted how hard, how complex, and even maybe how valuable the task is because it comes so naturally to them.
Yeah, I mean, an example in my world is travel planning. Travel planning for me is a relatively straightforward thing because I had to do it for so long. I got really efficient at it, and I can do it. But it's actually super, super complicated because I live almost, not quite, equidistance from 4 major airports. And so that changes. So, I mean, that creates a huge number of variables if I'm flying somewhere. It's not, so many people live, near kind of one major airport, and it's like, oh, my travel's so complicated. It's like, no, it's not. You freaking fly out of, Dallas, Fort Worth. That's where you fly out of. This is your choice. But for me, I've got 4 that I need to choose from. And so that's just one variable. Then we have to add in the traffic and the cost and the, and the times that the flights leave, and, all of those things. But because of what my role is, I also see how complicated it is. And when people say, oh yeah, you should hand off your travel, it's like, yeah, I can, but it's going to take a lot of time and training to be able to hand off my travel. It's not just, a VA thing, which a lot of people assume I should have handed off my travel to a VA eons ago, especially when I was traveling a ton. And it's like, yeah, I'm not sure that they could do it any faster. I think it would cost me more in time/money to have them do it because of all of the calculus that's going on in my head to figure out the details of it, right? But it's hard to be able to step back from that unless that's what you do, right? And I mean, that's the thing. That's what Sonia and I do. So we can say, oh yeah, no, this is way more complicated than people think think it is.
Okay.
So
Well, then,
so for me, that really is that's the trick.
yeah. So I want to then go into the effectiveness function of business operations. Because I feel like this one's probably just as complex as goals in that spectrum, between anybody can help the business do things efficiently and consistently to we need a higher level of skill set. So can you unpack that for me, Gwen, on that spectrum? And then Sonia, we're going to come to you on the numbers piece, I think. Be prepared.
So as we look at that, the challenge with the effectiveness is so often we get caught in the, Susie over here uses this system, and because she uses this system, it appears that system created this giant, business for her. So therefore, if I use that system, I'll get the same giant business. And we talk about it all the time in everyday effectiveness that context matters. And for me, that's where the effectiveness piece gets very, very nuanced. There are some things that there's probably really not that many different ways that you can do it. And, and the simpler and the low, and the more kind of low level basic, when we talk about email, most people are going to be using Google Mail. They might be using Outlook. They might be using some add-on tools to help manage it, but you're not going to write your own email system. I mean, no one's going to do that these days. That's just that's silly. That's not what you're going to do. So there's some places that you can have some consistency, but as we start moving up through the process, then we start getting into the uniqueness of our business model. This ties back to the goals, what our actual goals are. It gets very complex very, very, very quickly. And so effectiveness isn't always just about how much more can you get done in the same hour, but how much more of the right thing can you do at the right time in the right way. We talk about that a lot. Doing the right thing at the right time in the right way with the right person. That's really what effectiveness is. And that becomes this giant spectrum and is constantly changing as your business is changing, as you're hiring or letting go of people, as technology is changing, which heaven knows that's going really fast. I mean, there's a lot of elements that play into that. And so I think that one changes really fast and sometimes without us actually seeing it.
Well, and it also sounds to me like that's one that is just higher level no matter what. Like you just, in order to be, because you have to be able to see all those things to understand that they evolve, how they evolve, and then be able to identify them as they evolve. And that feels way more than, kind of an anyone can do it task. So am I right or am I wrong? Just want to make sure I'm on the right track. Okay, nodding. Okay, so Sonia, let's talk about the spectrum of accounting, because I could be ignorant to this, but I feel like that one might actually have some aspects of it that anybody could do versus needing higher level folks. But I'm curious from the tactical side, what do you see?
In accounting?
Yeah, so accounting is a function of business operations, right? So that's knowing your numbers, understanding them, why they matter. So Ooh. From the, anyone can do it to like, no, we need a highly specialized expert here. Like, what do you see in there?
Sorry, I'm just like, especially because like, I'm just thinking about just the most basic form. Think about it, like not just accounting, right? The whole process of ensuring that our numbers are good or bad or whatever. And then looking at trends over time, and then looking at, you know, COGS, and looking at all these special numbers, down to, let's say, if we were to go to the accountant, typically under the accountant is the bookkeeper, right? So under the bookkeeper is usually just the bookkeeper, but the bookkeeper has like other like skills that they need, specific skills that are related to categorizing, chart of accounts, like everything and anything that is involved in that. And so the reason I was like, wait, accounting, like really accounting? I'm like, no, that takes kind of a lot. Like, you don't, you know, there's one thing I don't mess with, the IRS and the police. You already know how it works out for people. So basically, you know, when it comes to the, like, even understanding the numbers, even looking at that, like, I'm like, oh my God, look, I have 30,000 in my bank account, but did you know that it's going to cost me 25 in payroll next month? Like, okay, great. And my revenue is like 25 or 10 or 15, and it's all sporadic. Like, there is so many different connections that occur. What I can tell you though is, if you look at it from the most fundamental part of it, right? Like an egg. I'm sorry, I'm kind of hungry. So like, if you just look at an egg, like, and you think that's accounting, right? Like, you're just like, cool, this is the accounting portion. But like, we then have to crack it to then having the inside be, you know, all of these different parts of something, right? Like, I don't know if you've ever had a double egg, good luck. But like, it's, you know, there's just so many, because you don't even know, right? Like that. And that's kind of like transactions, right? Like, it's like, cool, this could be this, or it could be this, you know, this could look like that, or it could be, you know, no yolk. Like, that egg was weird, or it could be a chicken, a baby chick, and you just, you know, you got a fully fertilized egg there. Whoops. So it's so hard to really like bring it down to like, you never need any skills. Anybody can do it. Especially, you know, it could be in numbers, it could be in marketing, it could be in anything. No one can just do it. And that's why a lot of people also shouldn't be entrepreneurs.
All right. So thanks for dropping that hard truth right here.
I want to add something.
Yeah.
I want to add something, because it just came up yesterday in a conversation, and quite honestly, I can't remember who it was with, but they were talking about, it's so often people think a VA can do the bookkeeping because all they're doing is recording data. But exactly what Sonia said, that if they don't actually understand how they're recording the data, then it's the old phrase, this showing my really old years of IT, of garbage in, garbage out. You're actually putting in bad information that then is creating reports and knowledge that you're making decisions from that is completely inaccurate. And so to me, it is all of those things. And yes, a bookkeeper doesn't need the same knowledge as a CFO or a tax professional, or, you know, I mean, there's different levels in there, but still understanding, you know, what are those details that you actually need to understand.
Thank you. Okay. That's literally everything I tried to say with my analogy there, and also with everything I was saying. That was literally perfectly summed up. Thank you so much.
Well, I like where that's going, because, you know, when I asked the question, in my mind, I was thinking, well, you know, you can get QuickBooks if all you need is, you know, if you want to elevate yourself from Excel spreadsheet to doing something online. And then once you have QuickBooks, then it's easier to outsource, and you can find a bookkeeper to categorize your expenses. And once somebody's categorizing your expenses, well, then it's easy to just generate some reports and send those off to an accountant. And, you know, they're easy things to outsource, because like tax law is tax law. So if your accountant has the permissions to operate in your state, in your country, then, you know, it's pretty good. The burden's more on them than it's on you. And this all works out, and it's neat and tidy. And then, as you both are describing your situation, I'm reminded of my very first experience in hiring a bookkeeper. Because I was like, big girl businesses need bookkeepers, right? So I hired one, actually not knowing what bookkeepers do. And every month my bookkeeper would come to me and say, okay, so she'd itemize all my charges and she'd say, okay, tell me where to categorize these. And I'm like, I don't know, isn't that what I pay you for? Like, aren't you supposed to tell me what category they go under? And she was like, you're the business owner. If you don't know, you should ask your accountant. And I'm like, I don't have an accountant. I have a bookkeeper. I'm a grown up. But what you're pointing out is, obviously, it's a much more specialized skill than I initially gave it credit for. And apparently, I still don't give it the appropriate credit. So, thank you for the lesson to me and also to everybody who's watching. And it's funny is we have somebody here watching who I think probably works with VAs or has a VA agency who says, this is why we don't support bookkeeping, because there's too many nuances. So I love that we're all learning this together. Now I'd like to move us into talking about resources. So resources are those pieces of the business that are limited in some manner. Gwen, what's the spectrum there, or is there one? Because I feel like really the lesson I'm walking away with is there's not as big of a spectrum as I thought in most of these functions.
So in resources, there are some things that are very tangible, right? And one of the things I also throw in resources is your technology, your apps, all of those things. And some of those things are at the I'll say the beginning edge of the spectrum. If you're using Google Suites, we'll just use it as an example because it's a pretty common one. You can ask, have you used Google Suites before? And people can say yes or no. They either know how to use the Gmail and how to use, Google Spreadsheets and Google Docs and Google, the Google Drive and those things. And although, all of these apps makes my eyes roll because I'm an old IT person, they're constantly changing. Generally, it's relatively easy to keep up on most of these, right? So there's that piece of the resources. And then there's the time piece, and we may need to make adjustments to the time piece. But if you've got good systems in place, which we haven't officially gotten the systems yet, but if you've got good systems in place, you can probably kind of maintain your time management systems. But we also have money, which really goes back into the finance piece. So I'm not going to spend much time there. But we have the human resources. And OMG, is that the biggest problem in the universe? Because we are people. Tonya knows, and I think Sonia knows as well, that one of my favorite sayings is people are problematic. All people, me people, you people. It's the nature of being a people. And that's one of the biggest. That's where the spectrum really goes, because the thing I've seen so many times, and this is the hardest thing. This is the absolute, in my mind, the very hardest thing about being an entrepreneur is someone who is doing a really great job earlier in your business is no longer the right person to be in your business anymore. They aren't a bad person. They haven't done anything wrong. They just aren't the right person for whatever role, activity, job, thing. And it's time to release them back to go find somebody else that needs that skill, right? And then, of course, you have to find a new person that has these new skills. To me, that's where the spectrum on the resource gets really, really complicated. And early on, you're looking for people that have a little bit of skill in a lot of places. And later on, you're looking for people who tend to be a little more specialized and go deeper in their skills.
I like that. That was a really nice, complete description of that whole, because resources in and of itself is a spectrum, but also at what business owners can be expecting as their business grows within that function. So let's move on to systems then. So Sonia, we're defining systems as simply how things get done. I know you are somebody that people lean on in terms of getting the thing done or determining how it should get done. What do you see as the spectrum there?
Well, it's interesting because there are so many different components of that, and my brain is going really crazy with my ADHD. So it's like, it's literally like, because it's very exciting. Okay, I will say the thing is, like, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle of question you just asked me. And the reason is because, people think that, hey, I'm going to tell you something. You're going to take it because you're my implementer or you're my, operations person, and you're going to implement it. You know exactly how to implement it, what to do, how to do it. But like, you also have to think about who is that business owner, right? If they're a part of it, what are their habits? What do you need to include? Who else is on the team, right? So then we have to think very high, and we have to think, and of course my dog is apparently choking in the background. So I'm so sorry. He's just coughing his brain out right now. So then in addition, from there, you then have to like kind of bring that down into even more points, and that person has to then delegate even better to someone else, who then delegates to someone else, especially in these larger companies. And so it's kind of like telephone, but if you have a task management tool, it's even better. But what happens is, like, I think one thing that people fail to see is there's so many nuances to these little easy things that need to get done. I definitely have some people that are no longer clients that are like, well, that takes 5 minutes. That takes 5 minutes. That takes me 2 minutes. That takes that 3 minutes. So what's going on? Why is it taking you an hour to do things that take me 15 minutes? So you have to think about, when you are delegating, you need to consider like timing for that other person. You need to consider, what do they know that you know that they don't know? And no one knows what they don't know, right? So even when you delegate, you may not give all the information that is needed. And so now you got to go back and ask those questions. And only some people know. So that's why processes are important, right? Processes are amazing, and they help us be more efficient, not waste as many resources. But there's still nuances.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so on that topic, as we get ready to wrap up, one of our viewers made a comment that I'm going to turn a bit into a question. And I would love for the two of you, and we'll go Gwen and then Sonia, if you'd like to add anything. I definitely want to give you the opportunity to do that, which is, it seems like the more nuanced the skill, which I feel like nuance is the word of the day for us today. But the more nuanced the skill or the knowledge, the harder it is to teach, transfer, and outsource it. And I know that this is, something that we have encountered a lot at Everyday Effectiveness. Sonia, you were just talking about it as well. So, Gwen, do you feel like that is true across the board, or do you think there is actually a way that you can shift some things so that it is easier to transfer or outsource the knowledge?
This is where having someone with outside perspective, like myself, like Sonia, anyone else that's coming from, an outside perspective can look and say, is it nuanced because it needs to be nuanced? Or is it nuanced because that's the way your mind works? And so to me, that's really where this trick comes in. And sometimes it's nuanced because it's nuanced, and that's fine. But my experience is most entrepreneurial CEOs, and I tend to focus working with women CEOs. They're very visionary, they're very creative, and they're also highly intuitive. And they use a lot of that intuition in a lot of what they do, which creates that nuanced environment. My goal is always to say, when is the nuance actually providing value, and when is the nuance actually providing complexity? And because both can be true. And and I'm not saying that there's ever this obvious black and white thing. It's like, well, this is always this and this is always that. But it's never quite that simple. But that to me is the truth. That if it is more nuanced, it is going to be harder to outsource. But there's a lot of things that we think are nuanced that don't have to be. And that's where, especially in the systems and processes piece, where the evaluation, having someone else come in who's had lots of other experiences and can see that there's lots of different ways to do this, because related to our overall anyone can do it myth that we're talking about, is most people assume that the way they do it is the way it has to be done. And that's not necessarily true. This is my constant, refrain of, when all you own is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And if you've got a nail sticking out, it's like, oh, well, and here's my hammer and I'm just going to hammer it in. Well, that may not actually be the right answer. And is it actually a nail or is it a screw? And should it be put in or should it be taken out? There's lots of pieces that go into it. And so when you have some, and okay, I'll stop in just like half a second, Sonia, so you don't explode.
Everything you're saying is like, it's my love language, honestly. Like, I am so happy sometimes when you're speaking about these things, because I just go down with you, like some people think we might be a little too opsy, and I'm just over here enjoying it. Like I'm watching, like I'm in, I don't know if this sounds good, but like, it's like when you're at SeaWorld and you're watching the dolphin do this stuff, you're like, oh my God, like I just love like that I can understand that this, like what's going on here, and that I feel, because I used to do dolphin training, like I didn't, but you get what I'm saying. Like, sorry, I'm just, my words are not coming out well today, but I just want to say that that's so good, Gwen. I just, sorry.
Oh, Gwen, I'll let you finish your thought.
But that really is the trick, right? Is you only know the way that you know, and that's where the professional can really provide value, is they often know multiple other ways. And in that option can either make it easier for you, easier for your other people, easier to delegate, easier to offload, easier to eliminate. And there's all sorts of options there. And so, yeah, the more nuanced it is, yeah, absolutely. But also that may mean you just need to hire someone with more skill, right? If it's more nuanced, it may be harder to teach, but maybe you just don't need to teach it. You just need someone who also knows how to do it.
That's good. I almost don't want to say anything else because that's so good. But I will, because we have to wrap up because we are out of time. It amazes me how fast our time goes each session. This is our second to last episode, just in case anybody's watching us doesn't realize this. This was a 6-episode series that we're doing. We wrap this up same time next week. So what I want to do is I just want to do a brief recap, and then we've got homework for folks, because we have homework for folks every week. I don't know if anybody but me does the homework, but we have homework. So what we've been talking about in this addressing the anyone can do it myth, right? We've broken down operations into 5 key functions or categories, right? So there's the goals, which is that focus and direction of your business; effectiveness, which is the business's ability to do things efficiently and consistently. And the consistent part is my personal challenge. Accounting, which is understanding the numbers and why they matter; resources, those pieces of the business that are limited in some manner; and then systems, how things get done. We've spent the better part of the last hour breaking those down and talking about nuance. We spent a lot of time talking about nuance. And Gwen, you posed a really good question that I think we're going to just pull into the homework for today, because what I would love for everybody watching or listening to do is take some time today, ideally, but today, over the weekend, whatever works for you, and write down all the pieces of your business that fall under those functions that we just described, the goals, the effectiveness, the accounting, so on and so forth. And write down which ones have to be done the way that you're doing them, or actually, I guess it would be to explore, do those things need to be done the way that you're doing them, or are they done that way simply because that's the only way you know how to do them? And then I think it would be meaningful leading up to our next episode to start organizing those things and to like actually know these are the things that only I can do. These are things that somebody else could do if I knew how to delegate it, if I understood the nuances that go into doing that. So that's your homework for today. I want to say thank you. Thank you, Sonia, for showing up with your enthusiasm and your analogies because they've been awesome. I want to say thank you to Gwen for bringing the breadth of your experience to the conversation, because I think more so than Sonia or I, your experience dips into so many different industries that it's really helpful in, I think, for the viewers and understanding how this all applies to them. And I want to say thank you to everybody who's watching, whether you're watching live or on replay, or you're listening to us later on. And I just want to say that if this idea of nuance has you really thinking, and as you start to do the homework, you start going, I actually don't know how to answer that, and you want a little guidance, please reach out to Sonia or Gwen directly. I mean, obviously you can reach out to me, but you know what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reach out to them. So you might just want to cut out the middleman and reach out to them directly to ask that question. And I really hope that you join us next time. So it's next week, same time, same channel, so that we can talk about outsourcing your operations, because this is really what everybody wants to talk about. Everybody wants to talk about how to outsource so that they have more freedom, more flexibility in their own business. So thank you again for watching us, and we will see you next time with Biz Ops Exposed. Have a great day.